In a stunning development today, the Federal Court of Appeal quashed the government's approval of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, putting its future in doubt and making it look more like a pipe dream. The court ruled that the government did not engage in meaningful two-way dialogue with First Nations communities during the last phase of the consultation process, saying it listened to groups but didn't actually respond enough or consider possible ways to deal with their concerns, and that the National Energy Board did not consider the impact increased tanker traffic.
It's there.
Snaking its way over 1,100 kilometers from Edmonton to Burnaby, the expansion would increase Trans Mountain's overall capacity by hundreds of thousands of barrels a day. But there was pushback from the very start. After years of environmental protests and ballooning costs, Kinder Morgan decided to bail. In May, Ottawa stepped in to buy the pipeline for billions of dollars. Now, clearly today's decision is a setback for the federal government. There is a lot of taxpayer money on the line, but as Briar Stewart explains, it is being seen as a win, at least for the time being, for those who oppose the pipeline project.
On the shores of Vancouver Harbour today, it was all smiles as members from several First Nations gathered to celebrate a big victory and a major roadblock for Trans Mountain.
It's a great day today. We won.
The First Nations were part of a larger group that argued Canada's approval of the contentious project should be quashed. And in the end, the Federal Court of Appeal agreed because it found there was inadequate consultation, saying Canada failed to dialogue meaningfully and grapple with the real concerns of the Indigenous applicants.
For years, Trudeau has been standing by their consultation plan, and it failed. It failed completely, and the courts agreed with us.
And that's not the only thing the court took issue with. It found that the review of the pipeline project was flawed. The court found that the National Energy Board made a critical mistake when conducting the review because it didn't take into account what impact the increase of marine tanker traffic would have on the environment, and in particular, the endangered southern resident killer whales. Because the population is already severely threatened.
The strength of the evidence.
Misty McDuffie is with the Rain Coast Conservation Foundation, one of two environmental groups that pushed for the approval to be overturned.
If killer whales are going to recover, the conditions within the Salish Sea could not get any worse, and this project would have made those conditions decline.
The cities of Vancouver and Burnaby were also part of this case, and while the federal court didn't side with their arguments, it's seen as a win nonetheless.
The question was, did the team win? It wasn't a question of who scored the goals. And so I think people in Burnaby are going to be looking at this and saying, we fought against this pipeline. I think they can sit back and realize that this has been at least stalled.
While this doesn't automatically kill the project, it will at least add significant delays. All of the construction that was set to begin now has to be put on hold, while the federal government figures out just how to proceed when it comes to building a multi-billion-dollar pipeline it also now owns. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now, we should, of course, point out that not all First Nations communities oppose this pipeline. There are those that support it. Chief Michael Laborde sees it as a good opportunity for his community.
The frustrating part for many First Nations along the pipeline, many of whom support it, is that this would have meant a lot of jobs and a bit of jurisdiction and environmental oversight. So what we do have to do is build on this court decision to get even more oversight and either tax jurisdiction or buy the pipeline outright from Canada.
So how is all this going down next door in Alberta? Well, not well at all, judging by Rachel Notley's reaction tonight. As Carolyn Dunn reports, it's driving a huge policy wedge between the province and Ottawa.
Minutes after the Federal Appeals Court dealt that blow to the Trans Mountain Pipeline, Kinder Morgan shareholders voted more than 99% in favor of approving the sale of the project to the federal government. This shareholder still believes Ottawa has the best chance of getting the deal done.
It's a battle. It's a stupid one, but it's a battle, right? And they're going to have to fight it in order to go through.
But Alberta Premier Rachel Notley will likely wear the political scars. After all, she's been pitching the idea of what she calls social license. Pay a carbon tax, get pipelines built.
Trans Mountain was the big one, and it is being denied. And this was outside of the control of the Alberta government. This was nothing that they did or did not do, but Rachel Notley will get the blame for this.
As if on cue, opposition leader Jason Kenney called for Ottawa to appeal the ruling to the Supreme Court and for the Alberta government to repeal its carbon tax.
We'd call on Alberta's NDP to withdraw the carbon tax, which supposedly was going to get pipelines built.
A furious Rachel Notley addressed the province and Canada with this stunning announcement.
With the Trans Mountain halted and the work on it halted, until the federal government gets its act together, Alberta is pulling out of the federal climate plan.
Notley's government was so convinced Trans Mountain was a go, it factored revenues from the pipeline into its budget forecast.
They will get built because they're important for Canada, they're important for Alberta.
But no bitumen flowing through the stalled pipeline project means less revenues flowing through to the provincial and federal coffers.
Scotiabank pegs our inadequate pipeline capacity to about a $15 billion cost to Canada. So that certainly affects our industry in a very meaningful way. We are losing investment, which we otherwise would get here in Canada.
So there will be immense pressure from Alberta to Ottawa to get the process going again, quickly.
Okay, Carolyn Dunn joins me now from Calgary. Carolyn, Alberta's far along already when it comes to climate change. What should we make of the fact that now Alberta wants to pull out of the federal plan?
Well, it's like some kind of acrimonious divorce all of a sudden. You know, Alberta is going to keep its controversial carbon tax, but they're just not going to play ball with the federal government until this is fixed. In addition, Rachel Notley says that she wants the federal government to make an immediate appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada and call an emergency session of Parliament to get this review process fixed. It may be a bit of wishful thinking, of course, but she thinks if all of those things happen, that there is a chance that construction could restart in the new year.
Okay, how could all of this affect her, hurt her, help her politically?
Well, hurt her for sure. You know, even if the federal government fast tracks the consultation and the application process, there are some real doubts about whether that's going to happen in time to help Rachel Notley politically. She was already facing an uphill battle in the upcoming spring election, but she was planning on campaigning as the premier who finally got the Trans Mountain pipeline built. Now, that seems unlikely, Rosie.
Okay, Carolyn, thanks for this. Carolyn Dunn is in Calgary tonight. And this isn't just a potential problem for Rachel Notley. The Trudeau government has an awful lot riding on this, too.
The federal government has reached an agreement with Kinder Morgan.
It was politically risky from the start. Let a pipeline project die on its watch or buy it and hopefully offload it later to another company. But even with today's uncertainty, the finance minister still says the investment is good for Canadians.
We chose to purchase the project because it's a sound investment and because as a government, we can manage risks that in these particular circumstances would have been difficult for any private sector company to bear.
Okay, sounds logical, but now Canadian taxpayers are bearing a project the government insists is in the national interest, even though they can't know for sure what happens next. A political delight for the leader of the official opposition.
Conservatives are outraged that after months of ignoring our requests in Parliament, here we find out today that they had absolutely no plan and they just don't know what they're doing.
In fact, the government is reviewing the decision, which could offer some practical solutions like going back and doing further consultations, more review on the environmental impact on marine life, and even appointing a dedicated envoy to speak for the government with all stakeholders, all of which would almost certainly be faster than appealing to the Supreme Court. And it would leave the NDP with no room to do anything but denounce the project altogether.
Climate leaders don't buy or expand pipelines. The government should never have bought this pipeline.
Well, it did. And the purchase will likely go through tomorrow, political risk and all.
And you know, Rosie, where I am out west, I see with my own eyes how entrenched all parties have become in their positions. But I wonder, would it have been an option at all for the federal government to back out, to cancel the purchase and say, you know what, fine, we'll cut our losses, the pipeline's done?
Before today, sure, there would have been some financial penalties by the company to do that. Politically, could they have done that? Probably not. You can't forge ahead with an ambitious climate change plan if you're not giving something in return. And that's where the politics get complicated.
Complicated indeed. Still ahead.
Today, an 1,100-kilometer pipeline slammed into 266 pages of a federal court ruling and came to an abrupt stop. Its future is now uncertain. The Trans Mountain project has been one of the great political sagas of the years even. But for people who live along the expansion route, it's also personal. So earlier this season, before today's ruling, Nick Purdon hit the road to find out what's at stake for them and their communities.
It's hard to find something more controversial in the country right now than Kinder Morgan's Trans Mountain Pipeline project. Here's the background. Kinder Morgan wants to expand their existing 1,000 kilometers of pipe so it will carry 3 times as much oil from Alberta's oil sands to the coast. The federal government wants it bad. They say it's critical to the future of the country. To environmentalists, it's a potential ecological disaster. So I'm going to drive the pipeline route from Edmonton all the way to Vancouver and talk to the people who live along it. Maybe they can help us better understand what's at stake. First stop is in Nisku, just outside of Edmonton, at Blackjack's Roadhouse. Now this is a kind of unofficial union hall for oil patch workers.
Thank you, sir.
Clarence Shields is the owner.
You're welcome. We could become self-sufficient as a country if we were to transport our oil, and if we were to able to get our oil to Tidewater, all of a sudden we're self-sufficient.
The view from Blackjack's is that oil powers the country, and all Canadians can benefit from getting it out of the ground. That's the promise of the pipeline.
We're going to drive the route of the pipeline. What would you say to people who oppose it?
Think Canada first. That's the important issue. In order to keep us whole, we built a railway. In order to keep us whole, we've built pipelines. This is really the economic future of the next generation. If we don't have access to our resources, we're going to be a have-not country. That's what scares me. So that tells you.
Yeah. Those are the stakes from someone who believes that more oil will only bring Canada more rewards. But then you drive into Jasper National Park and it's hard not to think of risk too. I mean, look at it. This might be the most beautiful place in the country. And the pipeline runs right through it. A spill here? Well, just imagine. Todd Noble has worked at the Jasper SkyTram for 22 years. Show me where the pipeline is.
Well, it comes in from the east, comes in around that mountain range and towards town.
10 years ago, Kinder Morgan was here upgrading the pipe, and Todd kept a close eye on their work.
They were in and out of here quite smoothly, no issues. The impact on the area was minimal. The area is not scarred. If anything, they came through here and you'd never know they were through here by all accounts. So.
Some people might be surprised, a pipeline expansion in a national park, the postcard of the country, and the guy who runs the tramway has no problem with it.
Well, yeah, I think face value, it can seem maybe a little disturbing, but having experienced it before and how they manage the area, it's not such a scary thing to think about.
The reality is, there have been spills in Jasper, several of them. And along the entire Trans Mountain route, since the 1960s, 82 spills in all. And that's the thing about pipelines. You don't really notice them until something goes wrong. This is what the existing Trans Mountain pipeline looks like. It runs along here, but you can't actually see it because it's buried in the ground. I follow the pipeline across the border into British Columbia. It seems that here the popular belief is that everyone is against it because of environmental concerns. A couple of 100 kilometers down the road is the town of Blue River. I pull in at the Holy Smoke Inn and meet Patty Tyke. What would the pipeline mean for your town?
Jobs, jobs, and more jobs. I know they're thinking of bringing in a 500-man camp. They came and they did a big open house, Kinder Morgan did, told us all how to apply for good-paying jobs.
Patty tells me how her town has fallen on hard times since the logging dried up. She's not worried about environmental risks. She's worried about Blue River.
I love this place. It's jewel of the Yellowhead Highway, Blue River. It doesn't get any better. This whole valley needs it. We really need it bad. The jobs and just the people and everything. We need the pipeline to go through in order to survive. Come on, Kimmer.
Kimmer, come. In BC, there are more and more people like Patty. Polls show growing support for the pipeline, now as high as 55%. That's not to say opposition isn't strong, too. BC is a land divided. I drive a couple of hours south. Outside Kamloops, farms start to appear. I pull over in the village of Black Pines.
Okay, that's the rooster. His name is Lucky.
Lucky?
Lucky, yeah. No, he was lucky because we had a whole bunch of males and he was the best one, so he's the lucky one. The rest went to freezer camp.
For Penny Power and Charles Hayes, it's simple. The pipeline would mean the end of their farm as they know it. What's Kinder Morgan's plan?
If you can see it in this orchard, it's going to be gone. They're going to come in here. The pipeline is going to come right straight through there, essentially right where we're standing. This whole orchard becomes their easement, their right-of-way here.
Doesn't everybody have to sacrifice for the country?
It's not for the country. If they want to do something for the country, they can refine that oil here in Canada and sell it to Canadians. The problem, it's bigger than the farm, right? The problem is that oil is a 19th century technology, and we're not having a discussion about what's next. What can we do instead of? It's just, oh, we've got to pump oil because, you know, we've been doing it now for 100 years and we don't know anything else. That wasn't easy.
Listening to Charles, it's as if the Trans Mountain Project is a kind of referendum on oil. Sure, the pipeline is a national issue, but it's local too. It crosses the property of 2,200 landowners, and each of them has to decide what to do. Another 250 kilometers south of Kamloops on the Fraser River is the town of Hope. The pipeline crosses right by the property of a local legend. Hear that? Well, that's Pete Ryan.
It's an owl?
Yeah, he's coming out there. Starting to shape him. It's the blocking of an owl coming up. Gotta get an owl ready because you know a lot of smart guys out there. We have to give them some smart answers.
For Pete and the pipeline, there's no debate at all.
Well, it's gotta get built. It's not a matter if it ain't getting built. If it don't get built, we're all in trouble. I think it's good for the economy and it should be done. Yeah, bring them in. Let's get her going.
Only about 40 kilometers south of Pete Ryan's chainsaw is Chiam First Nation. I stop him because one of the biggest misconceptions about the pipeline is that all Indigenous people oppose it. The reality is First Nations are divided.
The pipeline will be coming along at the foot of that mountain. And
Ernie Cray is the chief in Chiam.
The popular image of Indigenous people is we're not interested in participating in the economic life of the larger community. Wrong, as President Trump would say, if I can quote him or imitate him, wrong. We want this pipeline to go through so that we can improve our economic standing in Canada. Mm-hmm. Then we're not going to stand by and let a bunch of green groups get in our way.
What Ernie calls green groups are the environmentalists who oppose the pipeline.
I've already told them, because they've phoned me and they said, we're just trying to help you, Chief Gray. My response was, please, please stop helping me. I do not want your help. I don't know where they get off thinking that my community can continue to live in poverty in this country by opposing developments like this that we see as important.
Ernie Cray believes in the pipeline so much that he says his community would consider investing in it to make sure it gets built. On the pipeline route, you can toss stereotypes and misconceptions onto the road.
So our trip's almost over. Vancouver is just in front of us. And we have one more stop we want to make. We're going to go to Burnaby to the end of the pipeline.
Because in Burnaby is where Kinder Morgan faces its biggest opposition. A permanent protest camp has been built just before the end of the pipeline.
So open up valve to a revolution, devastate a pollution, demonstrate a solution, eliminate the confusion, cut wood.
Coastal First Nations and environmentalists vow they won't let the project get built.
So here I am, turning into stone, and then I'll be standing here for years.
More than 200 people have been arrested already.
You know, even the Conservative Party.
One of them is Atiya Jafar.
I felt a lot of power in the act of doing something bold and doing something where I wasn't just sitting back and watching these events unfold. I want to be able to look my children in the eye years from now and tell them that I did what I could do to protect their future.
Are you proud of yourself that you got arrested, that you took that stand?
My battle is with oil billionaires who think that they can get away with destroying the climate, with violating Indigenous rights. So I would say that I'm very proud to stand in this fight against the Kinder Morgan pipeline. I'm very proud to stand strong.
I'm very proud to stand strong. Those words could echo all the way back up the pipeline. I am very proud to stand strong could be something that everyone said along the route. And that's the thing. Sure, people don't agree on the pipeline, but each and every one of them is passionate about their community and the future of the country. Nick Purdon, CBC News, along the Trans Mountain Pipeline route.
Well, after today's federal court ruling, we contacted a couple of the people that you just met in Nick's piece. Here's what they had to say about the decision. Patty Tyke of Blue River, British Columbia, admitted she was stunned by the ruling. She told us today, I guess this means we're going to get increased traffic on our railroads here and oil cars, and not looking forward to that. Atiya Jafar of Vancouver was elated, writing, today is a day of celebration. I am immensely grateful for the First Nations who have led this fight since day one and the tens of thousands of people who have stood behind them since.